Good morning, everybody, and welcome to my grandmother's kitchen at Armstrong Acres. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lynette, and welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm hoping you can find some good information here that will help you be successful in growing your own food. All right, so this video has been a long time in the making, and what prompted it were two different visits recently to different places. One was a big box store, one was a local nursery, and I saw things at both of those places that upset me greatly as a gardener who wants others to be successful gardening. So the first was at the big box store. I saw that they had basil in pots for sale. Now, basil is a heat-loving plant, and this is not at all the time of year to put basil out. We have snow on the ground this morning. It's April 17th. There's snow on the ground. I don't put my basil out in the ground until the end of May when temperatures are in the 50s at night, okay? Not during the day, at night. And so I was very upset because poor unsuspecting souls are going to spend good money on these basil plants. If they're out at the garden centers, it must be time to plant them, right? Wrong. All right, so that was the first thing that upset me. The second thing that upset me was at a local nursery. They were selling pots like this, small pots, 4 pea plants in them that were about maybe 4 or 6 inches tall for $2.99. Now, anyone who's ever grown peas know that that 4 to 6 inch growth, like that's nothing. That's like a week's worth, right? And pea seeds are so cheap. I can't imagine why anyone would spend $3 for 4 pea plants when you could spend $3 on a packet of seeds and have 50 pea plants. Not to mention that those peas are probably going to do better if they're planted directly in the ground or directly in a big pot that they're going to stay in for their entire lives. Okay, so these things really got me thinking that I needed to make a video to help those who are new to gardening, or maybe not even new to gardening, figure out what to spend money on, specifically what plants to spend money on, and which plants to not buy at all. Which plants would you be better off growing from seed? Both fiscally, you know, it's cheaper to grow from seeds. Like I said, a packet of pea seeds is the same as a pot of 4 of them. So cheaper to grow from seeds, but also many times you will be more successful growing from seeds because there are plants that don't like to be transplanted. Okay, so we'll talk about that. So I kind of made some notes. I'm going to use them as a guideline to help you stretch your garden budget farther than maybe it would normally go. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about are the plants that you should buy. What plants does it make sense to spend your hard-earned money on? And the first group I'm going to recommend are slow-growing, warm-loving or heat-loving plants. Those are plants like peppers, tomatoes, eggplants, right? They are slow-growing. They need a long growing season. In order to have a successful tomato or eggplant or pepper harvest, we can't wait until our last frost and put seeds in the ground. In most cases, there's an exception I'll talk about later. So we need to either start them inside early or buy them from wherever you're going to buy them. Now, I start mine inside early because I grow many of them and I have invested in a setup. But if you don't want to spend money on lights or containers or seed starting mix or electricity to run those lights, right? It's not an easy thing to grow these plants from seed, and it requires an investment. So unless you're going to be planting hundreds of them a year, I would recommend that you buy those from a local nursery, a local farm, even a big box store, whatever. I would not recommend trying to grow them immediately from seed. All right, so the second group are plants that you only need one of, right? Anyone who has grown catnip or a mint or a lemon balm knows that you really only need one of those plants. You don't need to buy a packet of 500 seeds because you're never going to grow 500 lemon balm plants, all right? You need one, and then you let it go to seed, and then you will have all of the babies that you would ever want, okay? So it makes no sense to buy those from seed when you can spend the same amount, get the one plant that you need, and have instant gratification, okay? The third group of plants that you should buy are plants that don't germinate well from seed. Rosemary, lavender, stevia, a lot of the herbs like that are notoriously difficult to start from seed. Mints may not even come true from seed. So plants like that, again, I would just go buy the plant, stick it in the ground, love it, admire it, and use it. Don't try to grow it from seed. Okay. And the fourth type of plant, it depends on your personality, I guess. But some perennials grow really slowly, and they don't even bloom the first year. So if you would rather have that instantaneous gratification, then buy the perennial as a plant instead of trying to grow it from seed. You'll be able to admire it and get use out of it for longer. And perennials come back every year, right? It's not like an annual plant that lives its life in one year and dies. Perennials you get to enjoy year after year after year. And so I never feel guilty about buying perennials from another source. All right, so those are the plants that you should buy. Now let's get into the list of plants that I don't recommend. You can spend your money however you want, but I'm cheap. And if you are cheap and if you don't want to get taken for a ride, then these are my recommendations. Number one, there are a group of plants that don't transplant easily. Now, I'm not going to tell you they won't ever transplant because a lot of people do it and a lot of people are successful. But for beginner gardeners, cucumbers, zucchini, peas, beans, corn, anything with a taproot, they don't like to be transplanted. They don't like their roots messed with. So unless you know what you're doing, I would recommend not buying them as pre-started plants, okay? Because chances are either you will put them in the ground and they will die, or you will put them in the ground and they are going to suffer transplant shock, which means they kind of sit there and do nothing, right? So you would be better off buying a packet of seeds, putting the seed in the ground and letting it grow and never having to transplant it. Now, this was an experiment I did on my own last year in the garden. Other people have had similar results. I started cucumbers and zucchini ahead of time. I transplanted them in the garden, and on the same day, right next to those transplants, I planted seeds. And in every case, the seeds did better than the transplant, okay? So I would not buy those plants. Buy a pack of seeds, plant what you need, and here's the other thing. A lot of people don't realize, but a pack of seeds is going to stay good for more than a year. So just because it's labeled, 2021, doesn't mean that those seeds aren't going to germinate next year. So I've got cucumbers that I've been growing for 3 and 4 years, right? So a $3 package of seed might last you for 4 years. And that's a whole lot cheaper than buying plants that may not and probably won't do as well if you buy them. Okay, so the second group are fast growers, plants that grow really fast, and plants that you need multiples of. And by that, I'm thinking lettuce, kale, spinach, zucchini and cucumbers again, beans, right? Nobody plants just one bean plant, okay? So all of those grow really fast. So you're not really gaining anything by buying a transplant. You might be gaining a week or two, all right? But all of those do very well planted from seed. All of those, you're going to want multiples, right? Like, you need to plant a lot of beans in order to be able to have a good enough harvest to, like, have enough for dinner one night. And so any of those in that category, I would, again, buy the seeds, plant them directly in the ground, and go from there. All right, the third group that I would recommend buying from seed or not buying the actual plants are cool season plants that can be started inside because they germinate better when it's warm, okay? And then you can immediately move them outside because they're cool season and they don't mind our cool temperatures right now. So by that, I mean lettuce, kale, cabbage, broccoli, any of the brassicas, and cool season flowers, all right? Many of you have probably heard, oh, you can plant your peas as early in the spring as the soil can be worked. Now that's a true statement. It can be done. But it's only a half-truth. Because the other half of the story is peas germinate way better at 65 degrees than they will germinate at 40 degrees. Okay, and the same thing goes with lettuce. A lot of these cool season plants that can survive a frost, they will do just fine if the temperature dips below freezing, but they won't germinate well if it's that cold. So what I would recommend you do is you start them inside in any kind of container that you want. As soon as they germinate, move them outside, let them get acclimated to the weather, let them grow, let them have a few sets of genuine leaves, and then you can put them out in the garden, okay? For peas, I already said, they don't really like to transplant well, but you could grow them in a large container, start them inside, let them germinate, and then put the container outside. So none of these would require lighting and the expensive seed setup, and that's what I'm getting at, okay? So you can start them inside, move them outside. As soon as they put on a couple sets of real leaves, then you can actually plant them in the garden, regardless of what the temperature is, okay? Because kale and lettuce can take 20 degrees, all right? And if it should happen to have, freak weather, we've had freak weather, if it happens to dip lower than that, put a blanket over them, okay? So that's the third group of plants I would not buy. There's overlap, right? Lettuce and kale can be started inside and moved outside, but they're also fast growers and ones that we want multiples of. So a lot of these plants fall into many different categories. All right, so the fourth type of plant that you don't have to buy that I definitely would not buy, are the heat-loving plants that have been subjected to cold weather by the big box stores that aren't taking proper care of them. And this is a direct reference to the basil that I saw hanging out, all right? Even if the temperatures never dip below freezing, that basil plant is not going to thrive because basil just doesn't like being out in the cold, all right? So if you see heat-loving plants that are just out in the open, they've been subjected to temperatures below 50 degrees, I would leave them on the shelf, okay? Now, local nurseries will have heat-loving plants like tomatoes in the greenhouse, okay? And so it's warmer in there, that's fine, all right? But don't buy the plants early that are just out, left to their own devices in the cold. All right, and the final type that I would not buy are warm season plants that will mature relatively quickly, okay? And so I'm talking about like sunflowers, zinnias, marigolds. You can start all of those from seed after the last frost directly in the garden, and they are going to grow fast and they're going to produce fast, and you're going to have weeks and weeks and weeks of lovely harvest. Okay. Now the other type of plant that I would put in this category are determinate tomatoes. Okay, determinate tomatoes are the ones that only grow maybe 3, 4, 5 feet. They're not the vining ones that grow crazy. They flower it once, they grow their fruit, and then they're done. Okay, those are determinate tomatoes. They don't produce all season long. If you find a variety that is quick maturing, then you can start them from seed directly in the garden. You may have to baby them because tomatoes aren't the easiest thing, but they will mature before our first frost. Okay, so if you plant them, say the end of May, June, July, August, all right, it will probably be the end of August, beginning of September by the time you actually have a harvest. But that's plenty of time, okay, for them to bear their fruit over the couple weeks that they will, and then they're done. Had you bought those plants and put them in the ground as transplants instead of a seed, you're buying yourself a couple weeks, so you'll have the tomatoes earlier, but you're not going to have more tomatoes, right? Because they're determinate tomatoes, set what they set, and then they're done. Right? I would never grow indeterminate tomatoes from seed in our zone 6A because they may have time to grow a couple tomatoes, but indeterminates will produce all season long. And if you grow them from seed, you're missing out on a huge harvest opportunity. Okay, so determinate tomatoes only I would put in the group that you could start from seed if you wanted to. All right, so hopefully that gives you some sort of a place to start. I will recommend this. I think this is last year's catalog, but Johnny's has so much information available to growers. I just opened up to the summer squash page, and I will show you this. They have this chart for every wrong page, for every type of seed. They have, let me see if I can show it to you. This chart right here is a germination chart. So it will actually tell you what the best temperature is for germinating whatever it is that you're looking to grow. Let me turn to lettuce and show you the one there because it's very interesting. Again, lettuce, a lot of people will say plant it out early. It can take the cold, and it can. But what this germination chart tells us is that we're going to get much, much better germination at, what is that, 58 degrees soil temperature than we are at 40 degrees soil temperature. Okay, so if you don't have a Johnny's catalog, go online. All of their information is online. Their seed packets are wonderful, and I'm going to give you that recommendation as well. It doesn't matter where you buy your seeds from. They will all have directions on the back, okay? Please follow those directions, especially if you are a new gardener. There is a reason why you shouldn't start your watermelon plants 10 weeks before the last frost, okay? And that reason is they're going to grow so fast that they're going to outgrow the container. You're not going to be able to give them the light that they need, etc., etc. Okay, so there's a reason why companies tell you when to start inside. This one, actually, this is a zinnia, and it doesn't even say anything about starting inside, and that's because zinnias do so well if you just plant them in the garden. So I would encourage you to read the information on the back of the seed packets. I think that's all I had to tell you about stretching your garden budget. I will throw in, if you are in the local area, My seedling sale is going to be May 15th here in Dudley. Follow me at Armstrong Acres MA on Instagram for more information, or send me an email at armstrongacresma@gmail, and I can give you more information. Most of the plants that I'm going to have are heirloom tomatoes that you will not be able to find anywhere else. These are plants that I've started from seed. They're the old varieties that are grown for taste. And I haven't seen anywhere else in the area where you can buy the varieties that I'm growing. Some of the more popular heirlooms you can find other places, like Amish paste, easy to find. Cherokee purple, easy to find, right? Those are easy to find heirloom tomatoes. I am growing mostly varieties that are not easy to find. So if you're curious and want to try a tomato that maybe you've never heard of, come on out and see what I've got. I will also have some perennials and some other annual vegetables, but mostly it's going to be tomatoes. All right, so that's that. I hope you've learned something. I hope that you will not waste your gardening money. It's a very easy hobby to go hog wild for and spend lots of money on, and then what you end up with is a $200 tomato, and none of us wants to do that. Okay, so if you have any questions, ask them below, shoot me an email. I'll be more than happy to help. Hopefully by the end of the day the snow will be gone and I can get back out to getting the beds ready for planting. Happy growing, everyone. Bye-bye.